basis. Yeah. Cuckoo clock, cheese, they have a narcotics basis to the Swiss franc. Okay, I'm being silly, but because of the crisis that Japan got into, and quickly, they sold a lot of treasury bonds and they did not maintain the dollars in their dollar reserves that backed up their yen currency, and therefore the yen went down. Now, this is a paradox, and very few people get this. Alistair McLeod gets this, and a few others might, but they're not really plain about this. If a foreign country in a major Forex nation, IMF nation, sells treasuries and does not keep that huge amount of funds, the proceeds, if they do not keep it in the dollar, their own currency goes down.
Right.
The dollar goes up when they sell treasuries. The dollar goes up. I've been saying this now for 7 years. The dollar will go up, up, and up some more during its rejection and then vanish in a supernova. And that's getting re-quoted. And I love to hear the re-quote because it means that people are paying attention, but they're not getting one of the typical dynamics. The Japanese sold treasuries and their yen went down because they turned it into gold. All right. Now, here's my Operation Sandman revised forecast.
Okay.
20 countries, 2 trillion in 2 years. We got a long bull market in gold. We got out of the 2000 shackles.
Mm-hmm.
And now we're going to be looking at 2,500. There may be a pullback. I have a target. I said it was 2450, 2550 in a public article that Zero Hedge posted. By the way, my first article, Zero Hedge, and really happy about that.
Congratulations. I like Zero Hedge, yeah.
And thanks to Gold Fix, which is an approved contributor. They ushered that article in. They were a very helpful guy. He just changed his title a little bit. I said, hey, fine, do whatever you wish. We said, we're not going to change the article. Okay. Because of Operation Sandman revised to 2 years, we're going to see nation after nation slowly bleeding the U.S. Treasury and forcing them to cover with redemption, the dumped treasuries and the maturing treasuries. And this is a colossal sum totaling somewhere between 10 and 12 trillion this calendar year.
Wow.
That's 8 trillion in long dated maturities, treasuries, 2 trillion in short dated maturities they're coming to their end. They're maturing. And add to that all the dumped treasuries, like Norway saying we don't want them anymore. Korea saying we don't want them anymore. These are going to go down in value. We don't want to get holding the bag when these have a default. So they're smelling that default that I described as motivating the push over 2,000. Let me make a quick comment. When we start playing around with 2,500, you're going to wave bye-bye to 30 silver. We're going to go above it, cause short covering. And remember Fibonacci, it's such a small market. I think I'm going to get this right, Patrick, but I think a morning session in the stock market for Apple stock volume, just the morning volume in a single day is the same as silver for an entire year. Silver is a very small market. So once we get over 30, and I do not think the Swiss Basel crew are going to get in the way like they did in 2020. I don't want to get into that whole story, but they made available 200 million ounces and made sure we did not get above 30. That was in the GameStop and the Reddit networks. And Sprott wanted to do a Reddit network against silver, but he had his life threatened by, were they patriots or were they fascists? Okay, we're really getting tired of the fascists. Now, back to your question about the multi-sides. I think there's 3 very big factors that need to be mentioned. And I'm going to go in reverse order to what I wrote them down. The first is we cannot find buyers of our debt. We cannot find buyers of the maturing debt. We cannot find buyers of the dump debt. We cannot find buyers of our current deficit, which gets securitized into treasury bonds. So we're going to have to monetize them. I believe we're going to have a little bit of work in the background from the Exchange Stabilization Fund, but let's leave that as a wild card that could happen. Tapping the ESF. When you monetize debt, you introduce price inflation very quickly. It comes from the treasury bond market and works its way through the entire economy.
Now, when you say, let me just pause you really quick. When you say, just for the audience's sake, when you use the term when they monetize the debt, what specifically do you mean by that? You talking about just increasing the supply of money, printing money, as they say, even though it may not be physical printing, but basically just dumping more into the system, right?
Print money, dump it into the system, but in an organized way to cover the treasuries that we cannot sell.
Okay. And this correlates, of course, with the failed bond auctions you're talking about. Right?
Well, that's because we can't find buyers. And because we can't find buyers, we need to avoid the death of the primary bond dealers that are bound by contract.
Okay.
To buy whatever is unsold at an auction. And we're very likely in the next year or so to see a death of a primary bond dealer bank. And I don't think it's going to be a major Wall Street. It's going to be a minor bank. I don't know which one it's going to be, but there are several of them. And they're all at risk, and they're all complaining that they're at risk and they need help from the Fed. In other words, we need the money from the Fed and the Department of Treasury authorizing it in order to buy the debt. And here's some of the technical terms. It's called unsterilized monetization, because when they introduce new dollars into the system to cover that debt that we cannot sell, we're not draining the banking system of an equal amount. That's called sterilized. When you do unsterilized monetization of debt, you're printing money, you're not draining anything, you're increasing the money supply, and you're opening the door wide open for price inflation. And we're not only seeing price inflation from supply interruptions, supply problems, we're seeing it from sabotage, like diesel plants, diesel refineries, and we're seeing it from organized, what I call complicity between banks and insurance companies to raise insurance prices, the cost of premiums for home fire insurance. Okay, this looks organized, this looks complicitous. It looks like they're working together. If you're a mortgage holder and you cannot get fire insurance, you lose your home, you lose your equity unless you can sell the home quickly, but you can't do that either because the banks don't want mortgages. Okay, we got a conspiracy with the banks and the mortgages and the insurance companies. This is very dangerous. It's very scary, but we've got the threat of monetized debt and its resultant. Okay, this is not like you wait a year or two. No. You wait 1, 2, or 3 months and you start to see more price inflation. Now, remember, after the lockdown, we got a lot of price inflation in 2011. Okay? Yep. That was not from excess money in the system. There was some interruption of the supply chain. Okay, point number one, monetization of the debt will bring about more price inflation. And that means foreigners feel uneasy holding our debt. And there are a lot of factors involved in their minds. The second thing is, since the Maidan 2014 U.S.-Israeli coup of Ukraine, they raised the U.S. and Israeli flags in Kiev. That's who did it. Ever since then, we've been weaponizing the dollar in a grand style. We've been weaponizing it ever since 9/11, but we took it to a new level after 2014. We weaponized against the Russians. We froze their assets. And now this weaponization has taken on a new wrinkle. Foreigners do not want to hold treasuries if we confiscate Russian assets. You know, we talk tough. We act like, you know, it's our right because we declare the Russians to be guilty of war crimes when we're not covering the war crimes in Ukraine and underground in Ukraine, where they have baby factories that draw adrenochrome factories, bioweapon labs, you name it. The center of European trafficking and laboratory work is Ukraine, and it's never in the news.
Absolutely.
If you're a nation that wants to stop your NATO support, you're likely to get the dollar weaponization used against you, and they're selling treasuries. They did not I did. I believe that if we're going to confiscate Russian assets, we're going to see them confiscate assets, and we're going to see the whole world dump treasuries. Okay, the third point, this is more technical. Pardon my voice. I'll continue to talk right through my worn out voice. I don't care about my voice.
I'll pipe in anytime, but I'm just letting you go. You're on a roll. So if you need a break, you just give me a signal.
I have noticed in the last 2 months that every gold, I'm focusing mostly on gold. Gold, I said this, gold with a battering ram will knock down the fortress doors, the gates, and silver will come flying in on horseback. So I'm watching the gold market. Ever since we broke above 2,000, what was it, about November, December, we were playing with it and getting above it and then going below it. What I've noticed is every pullback is brief, doesn't last for more than a few days, and lately doesn't last more than a few hours.
Yeah, absolutely.
And a few have noticed that China and India are buying every sell-off. I believe China now has a strategy where they sense a greater hostility in a trade war with the United States. And China has decided we're going to convert all of our surplus. They've got a hefty surplus in trade. We don't. We got $1 trillion deficit. We also got $2 trillion federal deficit. We got twin $1 trillion deficits. This is absolute dynamite to blow up the bond market. The Chinese are converting their trade surplus to gold. And they're waiting. You idiots want to sell gold? You don't see what's coming? Fine, go ahead, you Western fools. Sell gold, knock it down. And the Chinese pick it up. The Indians pick it up. The Indians are picking up the silver market too. So you've got monetization of debt leading to inflation. You got weaponization of the dollars, which means that foreigners, even our friends, are selling the treasuries, U.S. government debt. And you got China and India and others. Okay, there's rumor of a multi-billionaire in Dubai. There's just rumors. And they're calling him a big buyer with no concern on price. Okay, so it's a billionaire. It could be, I'm just going to throw this out. It could be the UAE royals building their sovereign fund.
Could be, yeah.
I don't want to get into the UAE because they got a history and they've done some pretty weird things, but the UAE is going to be the window where BRICS take their treasuries. And here's another angle. Maybe it's not so much a billionaire, but it's a group of billionaires in Dubai, UAE, United Arab Emirates. And what they're trying to do is to get a sufficient amount of gold so they have the inventory to supply gold to all the BRICS nations that are dumping treasuries. That's another very big possibility. And the point of this hidden hand in Dubai, that's what they're calling it, the hidden buyer, they don't care. If gold is up 30 or 40 bucks, they continue to buy. Okay. We're not seeing the typical dynamics of anything witnessed in the last 10 years. I think this is a gold breakout. It's going to last into 2026.
Wow.
2-year rally because of Operation Sandman revised to 2 years.
Well, you know, I'm curious. Go ahead.
Go ahead.
Oh, no, I was just going to say, you were saying, and the BRICS. I didn't want to cut you off halfway through that thought there.
BRICS are nowhere near halfway done dumping treasuries to buy gold for their gold trade. What do you call it? Gold token. I call it a gold trade note. Okay, this is my past lexicon. I called it the Eurasian trade zone from 2014 on. and that's BRICS. Okay, they didn't go with the Eurasian trade zone. I gave it a designation that indicated Europe, like Russia, Eastern Europe, China, India, Eurasian trade zone. Okay, that's the core of the BRICS. I also talked about the gold trade note. The Voice tipped me off on that back about 2012 or 13. And that looks like it's the gold token from the BRICS. I didn't know about the ledger for blockchain at the time, but notice a month ago, Russian leader, China leader, India leader, and one other leader, I think was from Persia, they marched out and said, we're going to build out the BRICS blockchain platform. Okay, what's going to be on it? Okay, what they're saying is we're going to build an 8-lane interstate highway. And very few people are asking, well, what's going to be driven on your 8-lane highway?
Yeah, good question.
The digital ruble, the digital Chinese yuan, the digital Iranian rial, the digital Saudi, I think it's also called rial. I think the spelling is different. One has an I, IY, and the other one has no Y. It means royal. And it could be XRP, and it could be, they've never talked about a CBDC to be used on the blockchain in the BRICS. Okay, I think what they did was they mentioned everything but XRP because they don't want to get any more interference.
Mm-hmm.
We've got a bunch of frivolous bullshit lawsuits that have no merit, no evidence, and every single lawsuit against Ripple and XRP has failed. It's not a security. You know, this is funny. It's not a security and it's not a currency. They don't know what the hell it is. What it is, in my opinion, is an on-demand device for enabling a transaction between two parties.
Exactly.
Maybe what it is, in a better description, in a very, what's the word, colloquial description, it's a digitized handshake.
I like that. Yeah, digitized handshake. All right, so
Okay.
let me ask you this, Jim. I mean, you know, we're hearing a lot about, I mean, there's a couple of different ways I could go. I'm trying to decide here which way I want to go with this, but I am curious because I know you and I have talked about the underground wars quite a bit. And, you know, anybody who's been clued in on this topic has heard an awful lot about the White Hats recovering amounts of gold from underneath the ground that are just unfathomable. I mean, I've heard that the supply literally is almost endless in essence, that gold, it's one of the biggest lies ever told that, you know, that gold is not an abundant resource. So I'm certain that you probably heard similar things. And we know that one way or another, we're going into some sort of a new system. You've been describing the new system as it's been coming out. You've been tracking the whole process and laying out for us. I mean, we don't exactly know what it's going to be called. We have all these different terms like the QFS, Nasara, Jasara, but we know that there's some difference, some major difference coming. And certainly we see the gold prices, the precious metals prices, like you talked about, trending in this direction, like you said, could be till 2026, a major bull market. But what about all of this gold? What is that if it does in fact exist? If it's going into all of these different trusts, if it's perhaps, I don't know, maybe tied in some ways to what happened in Zimbabwe with their ZIG currency that they just announced, and we heard that they, I think it's the Chinese, have guaranteed zero interest loans for Zimbabwe to get out of debt. So there's clearly something going on behind the scenes involving a vast amount of wealth. So my question is, when that wealth finally comes to the fore, however that is going to be, what's that going to do to the future price of gold and silver in your, well, let's just stay focused on gold. I mean, I guess silver is a different conversation.
There's some really imbecile conclusions that I want to dispel.
Okay.
Let me do a preface. Okay, aren't there 100 million or more television sets in the United States at least?
I would imagine so, yeah.
Why doesn't the price of televisions go way down? They're not for sale. Okay, we got hundreds of thousands of tons of gold, and it's going to be used to create a global monetary system. That's not going to drive the gold price down. Okay. It's not for sale. It's for usage. How aren't there maybe tens of millions of bricks? I mean, like clay bricks in the United States? Yeah. Well, why doesn't the price of bricks go down, way down? Because they're building structures with them.
Gotcha.
Now we're going to have gold used to build out the bricks digital architecture.
Okay. Gotcha.
Okay.
All right.
The gold is in gigantic volumes. What I think might happen is we're going to see Trump say, you know, bring an end to the Biden show, and I'll bring an end to the debt. And we can start fresh. And we can have some of the most unbelievable 4, 6, 8% GDP growth years that the United States has never seen since post-World War II, right at the time that the jackass was born. I was born in 52. And the late 40s and early 50s were some of the most magnificent growth years in United States history. Okay.
Yeah, after the war, yeah.
Trump has been like, just think of it as maybe the captain for gold trove recovery in the Pacific Rim gold wars. Now, I'm going to make a couple of weird comments. I have no bashfulness at all about being weird. We heard 3 months ago that Kissinger was dead.
Mm-hmm.
And I believe he died 2 years ago. So the cabal decided it's time that his name died. They killed his name. He didn't die. His name died. He's not mentioned in any negotiations. He's not mentioned in any theories or planning of architecture for the global new structure, architecture. And the same thing happened with Jacob Rothschild. He was announced as dying a month ago. And I believe he died 5 years ago. So what they did was they saw that his name died. So he's out of the picture. Okay, Patrick, what I'm going to say is kind of strange. We won. Now we need to build out the architecture for the victory parade. And the parade is essentially the new monetary system.
Okay. I'm liking where this is going.
And coming to the fore is like gold from the Saint Germain Trust.
Mm-hmm.
And that was mentioned as a $21 trillion check that went to a military redemption office, an official U.S. military redemption office. And the MSM News doesn't mention that. So are we really left with 34 trillion minus 21? Do we really now have a $13 trillion debt? And is that being handled by some other huge gold trust? Because right now, roughly 10,000 tons is $1 trillion, roughly. You can make your correction, say, Jim, you're off. I know I'm off, but I'm not off by an order of magnitude. I'm not off by much.
Right.
Maybe it's like 11,000 tons. I don't care. But if I want to keep it simple, because I'm going to make an extrapolation. If 10,000 tons is $1 trillion, then 100,000 tons is 10 trillion. So if we got 3 times that, we need 3 times 100,000 tons. And there are a number of troves out there with that amount of tonnage. And I am getting, not bombarded, but I'm getting peppered with 3 or 4 different well-informed people who have some photographs of the Philippines and their 1.3 million tons of gold.
Really? We actually touched upon that a little bit in our last show. I think it was Yamashita's gold we were talking about, right?
Yamashita's gold. And one guy wrote to me about a week ago and he said, Jim, you mentioned that it's 7 different mountain vaults on several different islands. The Philippines is called the Philippines because it's the Philippine Islands. It's an archipelago. They've got dozens and dozens of decent-sized islands that have a gold vault on them. And some very wicked things occurred 50, 60 years ago, maybe more, like at the end of World War II, all the construction engineers were murdered after they made the vaults. So what is left is the maps. Okay, it's possible that we might get to a situation where the majority of the Philippines gold vaults have been discovered and put to use for the global system, and they know that there are a few more and they can't locate them. But you know, we've got such great technology that you could do low altitude aerial geophysical spectrometry. And if you got enough gold that's concentrated and refined and in a vault, it gives off a signal that's very powerful. So we might be able to locate them pretty easily. Anyway, there's a lady, they call her Mama something, and I cannot think of her name, Mama something, and she's the trustee for the Philippine gold. I honestly don't have a lot of information about this, except that some men, clients and followers have said, Jim, there are a lot of zeros. It's in the quadrillions. So when you say, well, we got 34 trillion in debt, they say, well, don't worry about it. We got quadrillions. And that does not even address the Vatican gold. Mm-hmm. Well, the story was that there's a tunnel from Istanbul all the way to Jerusalem, and they got 100 miles of gold vault stacks that are 5 feet high and 5 feet wide.
Yep.
Now, that's where you got the quintillion estimate. You know, these are a lot of zeros, and I get a little confused when you get a lot of zeros, but I do my best to start with something like 10,000 tons, which is a little more than Fort Knox, and that's $1 trillion. Okay, mm-hmm. You need to quantify. And by the way, Fort Knox is a pretty small vault.
Yeah, right.
Okay, the Germans have a vault that's a third the size of Fort Knox. Okay, fine. They're the biggest in Europe. They got 4,000 tons, 3,500 tons. And we never gave them back their tonnage in the New York Fed. What did we do? We started a war in Chad. We brought in a CIA army into Chad, into Northwest Africa, and we raided their gold mines, killed off a bunch of natives, paid off a bunch, and ended any kind of conflict, and just raided it, paid off little, bribes to the officials in Chad, and redeemed, what was it? I think it was something like, I don't know exactly, 300 tons of gold for Germany, straight out of Chad. We stole it from North Africa. I mean, these are really thieves.
That's right.
They didn't do anything for the Chad people. I'm sure that there were 20 people in the Chad government that either got a bullet in the head or a lot of millions in their hands. Probably Swiss accounts. As I said, they're backed by chocolate, cuckoo clocks, and narcotics. Oh, I left out cheese. Sorry. I don't mean salt.
Yeah.
Okay. I have a lot of respect for the Swiss economy that's legitimate. Like, they got really good pharmaceutical companies. They got technology companies. They got cheese. They've got a lot of, you could say cuckoo clock, but it's also very fine, high-level watches.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. World class.
World class. Okay.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. Well, go ahead.
I want to get back to the BRICS.
The BRICS, yeah. Go ahead. Yeah.
They are nowhere near done. What I like about the BRICS right now, this is going to sound a little, there are a number of paradoxes. I've already pointed out a few. Here's another paradox. I think some of the strength of the BRICS union is their bickering and their disunity. Does that not foment decentralized?
That's true.
Okay.
Yeah.
Two big players in BRICS say to China, we don't like your policy on this. And this is the social credit banking system. That was very evident in August last year in Durban, South Africa, where they kind of arrested President Xi and his entourage of security and said, you're not going to make your speech. We're going to take you over to a different location in a hotel, and we're going to keep you there. They were in confinement. So they did not have Xi as a speechmaker at the BRICS talking about social media, social credit scoring, that he wanted to advocate for all the BRICS. You've got disunity in the BRICS, and it's making the BRICS stronger.
That's a point well taken, yeah.
You got India. They said, we don't want the gold token. India. And they're not saying they want something else. They're saying, we're all for anything that's de-dollarized. India is adding strength to the de-dollarization factor that holds together the BRICS. They don't want the gold token. They want rupee payment for Russian oil, and that's not working. So they might go back to the UAE dirham, dirham, D-I-R-H-A-M. And the dirham is actually pegged to the dollar. We're going to see the dollar used as an accounting unit. And that's going to be another feature of the BRICS. They're going to have commodity trading, dollar accounting unit, just to keep everything consistent and organized. And they're not going to use the dollar for trade payment. India wants anything besides the dollar for trade payment. And they've got deals to supply diesel and gasoline to Western Europe. And France just signed